There's a chill in the air. The stench of death encroaches this harvest season. For as the crops wither and leaves begin to turn, the children will be choosing from amongst a repertoire of characters to disguise themselves as. It's not the ghouls and the ghosts they hide from in their costumes, and it's certainly not the stench of decay in the air that will ruin the celebration of the harvest season. Oh no. Rather, a single term, a limit imposed upon them that will cause the mood to turn sour.
Problem, ladies and gentlemen, robots, aliens, and the like, and it's one that I'm rather fairly surprised at given the current political climate, but at the same time, not that surprised, to be quite frank. I'll explain. Today we're going to take the opposite approach we usually do on my channel, and we're going to side with the anti-cultural appropriation team by disagreeing with them. Confusing, yes, I know it is, but bear with me. It is the season of cultural appropriation this happy Halloween, or Halloweeb. For those of you who need a brief reminder of what exactly it is that cultural appropriation entails, allow me to provide a definition. Cultural appropriation is the adoption of elements of one culture by members of another culture. This can be controversial when members of a dominant culture appropriate from disadvantaged minority cultures. You see, I've noticed an incongruence in the mentality behind cultural appropriation, and that those individuals who would find such behavior utterly abhorrent oftentimes are also perfectly willing to go along with it to shocking ends in specific instances. Let me elaborate. Today, we are going to be discussing the collective Western public's contentedness, I guess you could call it, with cultural appropriation in the mainstream to such a hell of a degree, quite honestly. And we're going to be doing this by using a prime example, that of the public's perception of the swastika over the last 10 months. Of the year of 2019, that is. Big fat disclaimer for you silly heads in the back window. I am assessing this based on generalities in the specific instances that I'm presenting to you, so if you personally take issue with the point that I am here making, please note that this is not about you, rather it is intended as an intervention with Western society as a whole. So, like and share this video, because you know for a fact that YouTube isn't going to propagate my message into the ether, so that's your job this Halloween. Thank you in advance. So, let's get into talking about the only symbol on the face of this earth that has the ability to simultaneously twist panties, knot guts, and clutch pearls in any of its plethora of renditions. Before we can even approach a year in review of the ridiculousness regarding a geometric figure, we first have to go over the history of the symbol itself, ad nauseum. You see, I have to give you an agonizing amount of context so that when we eventually do get into the shenanigans of the last 10 months, just how utterly hilarious all of this hullabaloo really is will be painstakingly clear. So, without further ado, roll the clip. So, the swastika. If we look at prehistory, or the period of time before written records, the earliest swastika finding we have is from about 12,000 years ago in 10,000 BCE. Paleontologists in 1908 actually found the earliest representation of the swastika that we have to date carved into the belly of an ivory bird figurine near the Russian border. Flash forwards to the Bronze Age of England in West Yorkshire today, where we find swirly swastika resembling symbols carved into rock face. Jump up to about 6,000 BCE, from which time we have discovered both clockwise and counterclockwise swastika symbols on ceramic pottery in Bulgarian caves. Around 25,000 BCE, we find archaeological evidence of some of the earliest representations of swastikas from the Indus Valley civilizations. Indo-European civilizations, from the Celts to the Slavs, the Greeks and the Germanic peoples, the Illyrians and the Indo-Iranians have made use of the swastika in high concentration in artifacts dating back to the Iron Age as well. And who can honestly say why?
Nazis.
We have textile fragments found at Kwa el Kabir from the Coptic period of Egypt sporting the tiniest of swastika designs if you care to get out your magnifying glass. In a more historical sense, the swastika has had its symbolic usages in everything religiously and everywhere. In Asia, for instance, the symbol was used in the Indian religion Jain Dharma or Jainism to symbolize the seventh Tirthakana. Traditionally, these are recorded as spiritual teachers of the righteous path. The forearms of the swastika symbolize the four states of existence: heavenly beings, human benefits, hellish beings, and Tiryaka. It should also be noted that the swastika is an important symbol in Hinduism as well. As a symbol of Ganesha, the Hindu god of luck and fortune, it is no wonder why it is used before entrances and in doorways to denote the beginnings of financial settlements for practitioners. Given that Buddhism itself is an offshoot of Hinduism, it's no wonder that such an important symbol to them as the swastika gets carried over. It is still used to mark beginnings, however, in the Buddhist tradition, they mark the start of Buddhist texts, as they are symbols of universal harmony, prosperity, plurality, good luck, abundance, dharma, fertility, long life, and eternity. There are quite a number of interpretations depending on where the Buddhism is being practiced. In fact, in Tibet, where it is considered the first symbol of the Buddha, it is depicted on his body in many places. Further, in China, swastikas are included in the Chinese writing system from the Lao dynasty as variant characters for Wan, which when translated means myriad, all, or eternity. In Japan, the swastika or the Manje symbol marks the location of temples on city maps, a nod to those Buddhism traditions I was referencing earlier. Further, in Korea, the swastika or Kasumman translates to 10,000 of the breast, again with reference to the Buddha. In Germanic cultures, historically the swastika was depicted on artifacts dating from the Iron Age. Further, in Slavic countries, the Rodnov, a Slavic native faith, uses the hands of Svarog to represent the god of heaven. But the Slavs also have a different variant for the symbol itself. The Kolovrat is a solar symbol in the shape of a wheel that implements two swastikas laid upon each other. The Celts also have their own use for the swastika, as you can see here imprinted 27 times on what is referred to as the Battersea Shield. In ancient Greece, we see the swastika imbued on silver coins from Corinth, Mycenaean dolls, engraved in helmets and painted onto pottery. The Armenians regarded the swastika, or the Arvekhak, as the symbol of eternity and rebirth. Even in medieval Europe, the Christians used the swastika to decorate whole churches as a carryover from Roman designs such as the Sophia Cathedral mosaic from the 12th century. Less commonly, but even so, swastikas can be found in West Africa adorning gold weights of the Asante people, even as far as removed from the rest of the world until, of course, Columbus's arrival. As the Native Americans can we find the utilization of the swastika. To the Navajo, the swastika, or the whirling log symbol, was used on textiles, and it was meant as good luck. Of course, the swastika's most common association was with Asian cultures, and so that's typically what you would have found in terms of reference historically speaking until the excavation of ancient Troy by Heinrich Schliemann in the 19th century, where we see a resurgence in the popularity of the symbol. Schliemann subsequently drew the connection between ancient pots found in Germany with the symbol on it and theorized that the symbol was of religious significance to the Teutons when he excavated Troy and found the symbols imprinted on various artifacts there. His arguments from his book on the matter, Troy and its remains, would serve as the justification for German ethnic and nationalistic movements to incorporate the symbol into their movement. This is how Adolf Hitler saw it as justification to adopt the swastika as a symbol for his own National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazis, in the 20th century. Since the end of World War II, 74 years ago, and the failure of the Axis powers to subdue the Allied powers, the swastika has remained predominantly affiliated with the Nazi Party and the atrocities committed during the Second World War. And so that brings us to today. Now, with regards to World War II, I don't think I need to go into nearly as much detail on that front, as we are addressing the fact that a number of people seem to regard themselves as authorities on the subject of the swastika with only a seemingly base understanding of its use from a relatively narrow period of time, say late 19th to early 20th century, in the history of the world when compared against the speculative 12,000-year range of its use. I'm sorry if it's a little bit lax in that area, but you'll live. I promise you. Let's highlight some of those incidences in the current year, though, because I do find them to be pertinent. We'll only be using the 10 months thus far of 2019 for our purposes, and any incident that transpired as an act of vandalism will not be included, nor discussed on grounds that we are addressing incidences of outrage that perpetuate this revisionist mindset that I'm talking about, rather than incidences of the incitement of the outrage. Do we understand the difference? Good. Moving on. January 2019, Japan has found itself in direct conflict with Western notions regarding the swastika, as they make use of it on their maps to denote temples and the like, as was mentioned previously. However, with the impending 2020 Olympics being held in Tokyo, they have proposed a shift in the representation to a 3-story pagoda to represent temples, with this still appearing on the temples themselves, the swastika that is, when you go to visit them, and on Japanese language maps, not the English translated maps. All this would be done so as not to offend the incoming Western visitors and tourists who remain ignorant to the long history of the swastika in Japan. In fact, the outrage revisionism of the swastika is so pervasive that it's not just very to moderately close interpretations of the symbol that tend to cause a ruckus, but also vague and ambiguous, colorful, unrelated shapes as well, as Slack found out itself when it found itself in hot water over their logo redesign at the beginning of this year. Some likened it to a swastika, and I'm actually having trouble discerning exactly how they got that from the symbol. Like, genuinely, I am confused. Moving onwards, the band BNK48 found itself also in hot water when a 19-year-old singer from the band, Namsai, went viral sporting a shirt that included the swastika on it during the band's rehearsal. The singer and many of her fans claim to be ignorant of the history surrounding the swastika and have agreed to take part in an educational workshop on the Holocaust to raise awareness, which is actually rather ironic to me that we have to re-educate people on the meaning behind the swastika for this specific time period and not actually delve into the significance of it prior to that. And then in April of this year, Kat Von D came under fire due to rumors of anti-Semitism. The evidence to support this came in the form of a picture surfacing of her husband, Rafael Reyes's neck tattoo, a swastika symbol nestled on top of a lotus flower, I believe. In an interview, he actually explained its purpose. Quote, "I was really inspired by what the symbol meant. It represents so many things, the seasons like winter, spring, summer, and fall. It's a symbol of the sun. It's also used as a compass." He goes on to describe traditional meanings of the swastika in the Buddhist tradition and other traditions that I have discussed previously as well, but it boils down to this. Either you believe that someone with a swastika tattooed to their neck is being genuine about its meaning, or you look for more evidence to support your own baseless accusations. And it seems kind of sad to me that we've come to this level of revisionism, where we're willing to just only accept evidence that supports the revisionism and nothing else. A week later, a Colorado neighborhood voted to change its name from Swastika Acres, a name it had had for 111 years, well before Nazi Germany, by the way. They changed their name to Old Cherry Hills. Then in June, a California man invested a great deal of money, time, and effort into a gigantic cement swastika on his front lawn, justifying it as a Tibetan sign, which it most certainly is, as I've outlined previously, that preempted the Nazi revisionism, which it most certainly did, and it was on his lawn, so it is his business, which, duh. And then interviewers had the audacity to ask this man if he was Tibetan, as if that justifies his use of the symbol. Not that it matters at all, because the meaning of it in one's own head can persist regardless of your national origin and heritage, right? And still in June of this year, in Canada, we find people becoming outraged with a street name eliciting such vitriol that people took efforts to legally change the name of the street, only to be shut down. This is a street name that had been the street name since prior to World War II, prior to the events of hatred and death that they refer to in this very article. Even so, there is a notion amongst people that this could have been a more sinister naming than simply relating it to an ancient peace and eternity symbol. What? And then a month later, at an educational institution of all places, Indiana University opted to remove whole-ass tiles from the walls inside of a building that had been placed there more than a century ago. So, again, predating the Nazi Party. And they had been included amongst other tiles with symbols from different cultures as well. So, does that not denote a certain context that you should be able to appreciate instead of just blatantly ignore for your own revisionist mentality? Despite having a posted explanation of the significance of the tiles that contradicted the notions that it was related to Nazi symbolism, despite the tiles having been placed in 1917 prior to the formation of the Nazi Party itself, people still found them offensive, and the school is still sanding the tiles down and remounting them to remove all traces that they had ever existed. And then in Nebraska that same month, workers found markings while cleaning and replacing piping for a ventilation system. These were markings that, and I quote, looked like swastikas, like Nazi symbols. And despite the fact that no one will ever see these after they finish working on these pipes, that no one would have ever even known about them had they not started to do work, they thought that it might be prudent to all out replace whole pipes, not just clean them out. To give you more background, actually, the company responsible for said piping, Crane Co., used the symbol from 1910 to 1936 as a foundry mark on cast steel products from Chicago foundries because they were understood to indicate good luck and fortune, which they still do. Imagine, if you will, having this notion of offense ingrained so deeply into your psyche that any representation of a symbol which harbors your vitriol, whether it be in a logo or, say, an amusement park ride, instigates that degree of offense. Germany has this in stride, and as a result decommissioned the Eagle Fly because this amusement park ride looked too much like flying swastikas. In current month, we see people getting pissy over an Indian restaurant using a swastika to mark prior to the entrance of its establishment. Does it sound familiar? It should, because I just spent a while going over the swastika's religious significance in the Hindu religion specifically. But no, of course, the internet knows better and hence are boycotting this restaurant for the utilization of this symbol. And so we find ourselves here today, Halloween, and I'm left wondering to myself, everyone's always bitching a fit about how we can never let the white man, quote unquote, poison the intended meanings behind symbols, clothing, traditions, dances, earrings, take your pick. That we can't let the white man repurpose it for their own nefarious use because they're the majority dominant power and the minority doesn't have any power or voice and doesn't have the power to tell them to back the F off, right? And yet, here we are, perfectly willing to just hand it over to said parties and asking cultures that still have a use for swastika today with a meaning that is removed from this notion of white nationalism to essentially wash away 12,000 years of history prior for the comfort of our fifis, of historical PTSD? Are you kidding me? If you don't want a symbol to be culturally appropriated, methinks that the last thing that you should be doing is handing that symbol over to said party, misappropriating your symbol, right? In no uncertain terms is anything going to change like lickety-split because I just made this video. Because you've made the personal decision not to be offended by the use of the swastika. Because, like I said, it's been so ingrained in our psyche as a society because of the events of the Second World War. But I'll have you know, the reason why I'm making this video is because it's not just the swastika that we're talking about here. It is, however, the most prevalent and extreme example that I can think of this occurring. Along these same lines, we have symbols that were also repurposed during the Second World War to mean something akin to Nazism, right? We have the Armenian Sig, or Sol rune, originally intended to mean sun, being misappropriated for use by the Nazi elite SS units. The Roman salute itself was an ancient Roman custom that the Italians originally made use of during the Second World War that was then adopted by the Nazi Party in 1926. And, on a less historically charged note, today the Pepe meme, the okay hand gesture, have been to varying degrees of success co-opted and willfully given over to bigoted groups. In contemporary culture, we find ourselves inundated with databases, such as the Anti-Defamation League, claiming to have some authority on the nature and intent behind the use of symbols, not just ancient runes and traditions, but hand gestures, memes, numbers. They all have their meaning, revived, reviewed, and retconned for the sake of the outrage culture that thrives in this day and age. So I find myself asking this, in all honesty, which is worse? To, as has been attested, culturally misappropriate symbols for the use of racism, violence, bigotry, and hate, or to stand by, allowing and even encouraging such misappropriations to succeed in their attempts to co-opt the meanings of symbols for these parties' own nefarious purposes. I'll let you decide. Thank you for your time.